We're going to make everyone sit in the front row here. Welcome. My name is Jim Pello, and it's my pleasure as President and CEO of CIEE, the Council on International Educational Exchange, to welcome you here to Portland, Maine, our worldwide headquarters, and for this third annual Justice for Women lecture series. In addition to everyone gathered here in this room today, I'm also pleased to share with you that we have over 250 of our alumni and friends from around the world streaming in online live from over 50 different countries. So with America, we basically are at least 51 different countries gathered here around the podium and around the couches here to listen from our distinguished speaker. So I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I want to invite you to please feel free to ask questions and get involved. The wonderful thing about this opportunity for CIEE is that it really runs as a little bit of a fireside chat. It's an opportunity for us to engage firsthand and in a very intimate way with world leaders. In fact, each year, this series has been bringing distinguished speakers from around the world, distinguished women leaders who are leading their countries and their organizations, who have incredible experiences and wisdom, and they provide each of us with a rich opportunity to embrace that, to absorb it, to reflect on it, and in a way, big and small, to inspire our lives with their messages. Now, the Justice for Women lecture series was first envisioned by my good friend Kathy Lee of Lee International, who believed that we could learn a great deal from listening to women leaders from around the world and apply their wisdom in our daily lives, in our communities, and make our communities a little bit better. And her vision was brought to life through a collaboration with the University of Maine School of Law under the leadership of Dean Peter Petagoff. And together, they housed the lecture series in an endowment. It's formally housed in the law school. And I'd like to take a little bit of a break here to invite Peter Petagoff to step up and share with you a few thoughts on the lecture series and his vision for the future of the series, in addition to the special events tonight. Peter?
Thank you very much, Jim, and thank you all for coming, and thank you all from around the world, wherever you are, for joining us today. This is a very exciting lecture series. We established it at the University of Maine School of Law 4 years ago. This is our third annual lecture, Justice for Women lecture. From the perspective of the University of Maine School of Law, this is a critical way that we can both connect with the world and also bring a global conversation about justice for women and girls here to Maine. And it's been wonderfully successful. The collaboration with CIEE is one of our favorite aspects of the way the series has developed. It started as a premier lecture, and then with Kathy Lee's leadership, expanded to multiple events when our distinguished speakers have come from abroad. And this CIEE event is one that connects us even more with the community and with the globe. And I thank Jim for helping to support the series and for hosting this panel discussion. We're just so honored that Dr. Sima Samar has joined us. We're also honored today that Lauren Lovelace will be here to help facilitate this program. So sit back, enjoy, and I hope you'll have lots of questions. This is a premier event. Tonight is another premier event. The Justice for Women lecture will be at the Abramson Center on Bedford Street in Portland at 7 o'clock tonight. We have already about 580 registrants. There's an overflow room. There's room for more, so please join us. And again, thanks to CIEE.
So one of the funny things about the poor speaker that's invited to the speaker series is they think they're coming for one lecture, but we actually drag them all over Portland. Dr. Samar was at Deering High School this morning being grilled by those young students. She's with us today for a lively conversation. We're going to give her about 20 minutes to break, and then we're going to put her in front of the law school group of distinguished students, alums, and judges from around the state. So Dr. Samar, I want to thank you again for joining us, and we hope the seat is comfortable for you here for this afternoon's program. One of the things that makes us especially proud to be part of this partnership is that the mission of this Justice for Women lecture series is our mission. For 65 years, our mission has been to sponsor international education programs that foster peace in our world, both locally, nationally, and internationally. And this program enables us to advance that mission in a very special way by bringing it here to Portland. In fact, the Justice for Women lecture series is perfectly aligned with our founding purpose. And we pride ourselves across the world to develop programs in different countries and different communities that further peace. We strive to foster understanding and mutual respect between communities and nations by promoting the exchange of ideas and experiences. We strive to help students, teachers, and young professionals from around the world develop the skills that will help them become more active and responsible global citizens. And each year, we invite 17 local high schools to join us. And I know that there are several here with us today. It's hard to get out of school in the middle of the afternoon. We always try to give those kids a reason to get out of class. We just had a wonderful lunch with students and teachers from Deering High School and Waynfleet School. I had a very intimate conversation with Dr. Samar around leadership and women and girls issues. And we hope that the participation in the local high schools will grow over the years. But again, it's one of those ways that we can bring the world to Portland and Portland to the world. Perhaps most importantly, CIEE is proud that we provide in over 50 different countries programs and partnerships that increase access to the underserved, to students who might not otherwise have the opportunity to participate in international programs, especially women and girls. One recent example of CIEE's commitment to education for women and girls was our decision this past holiday season to share with everyone a copy of I Am Malala. You'll remember her story highlights the importance of the challenges associated with educating girls, a story that encourages us to explore in ways that might make our lives a little different, how we can stand up and more convincingly stand for strong values in our towns and communities. Today's honored guest, chairperson of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, Dr. Sima Samar, knows a thing or two about standing up for herself, for her people and her community, indeed her entire country. The well-known author, Anais Nin, once reflected that life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. For Dr. Samar, life has expanded exponentially. Her work in Afghanistan and the surrounding region has required astonishing courage. For decades, she has persisted in the face of significant political obstacles and personal threats to fight for justice, for fairness, and for basic human rights. Today, we are in the presence of a woman of great strength and determination, a woman of justice and grace, a woman of action and courage. In a moment, you will hear from Dr. Samar and learn her personal story of fighting for what's right, for security for women and girls, equality in education, and adequate health care, to name a few. Following her remarks, we'll have time to ask questions and probe further on how we might enact positive change in the communities in which we live and serve, and assist, or perhaps assist her important work in Afghanistan, which was a topic at lunch. But first, it's my privilege to introduce another special guest, Ms. Lauren Lovelace, the Executive Director of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council at Georgetown University, who has flown up from Washington, D.C. to be with us and serve as our moderator for today's program. Welcome.
Thank you.
Ms. Lovelace is a decorated and distinguished Foreign Service officer. She has served in India, Egypt, the U.S. Mission to the United Nations in New York, the International Visitor Leadership Program in New York, the State Department's Bureau of European Affairs in Washington, D.C., and recently in Bangladesh, where she launched a groundbreaking public-private partnership entitled the Edward M. Kennedy Center for Public Service and the Arts, which was designed to engage and empower Bangladesh's youth majority through public service. Ms. Lovelace holds a BA from Tufts University, a Master's in International Law and Diplomacy from the Fletcher School, a Master's in Public Administration from the University of Kentucky, and a graduate certificate from St. Petersburg State University, Russia. She knows how to write a paper or two. She is also the recipient of the State Department's Distinguished Superior and Meritorious Honor Awards. In her role as Executive Director of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council, she advances the Council's mission by convening committed stakeholders, mobilizing public and private sector resources, and encouraging dynamic partnerships in support of Afghan women and children in the areas of health, education, economic empowerment, and leadership development. We are honored to have Ms. Lovelace serve as today's moderator. First, she will provide us with a brief overview of Afghanistan and then lead a very fun discussion, an important discussion with Dr. Sima Samar. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Director of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council at Georgetown University, Ms. Lauren Lovelace. Lauren?
Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you to all of you who are here in person and also virtually. It's so exciting that we have people from in 50 different countries who are with us today, so that's wonderful. And special thanks to Dr. Samar. I am so excited. I'm going to try to stay in my seat today, but I might actually start walking around and getting people up and going, because we have with us truly a hero, certainly in Afghanistan, but also just internationally in support of human rights and women's rights. And it is my tremendous honor to be here with Dr. Samar today. So thank you to CIEE, to Jim, to Elizabeth O'Neill, to Jill Sadie, to Kathy Lee, and the CIEE staff, and all the friends and students in Portland who are participating today. I want to tell you a word, if I may, about the U.S. Afghan Women's Council. It was founded in 2002 and designed as a public-private partnership in support of Afghan women and children. The council has as its honorary co-chairs Hillary Clinton and Laura Bush. We are seated in Georgetown University, and our focus, our initiatives by some 46 members right now in the areas of education, health, economic empowerment, and political participation and leadership. So these areas are very much at the heart of what we do at the U.S. Afghan Women's Council, and certainly at the heart of what Dr. Samar does as well. So on behalf of the council, our honorary co-chairs, our co-chairs, Catherine Russell and President DeJoya from Georgetown University and the Office of Global Women's Issues, just a sincere pleasure to be here. If any of you have probably had the chance to fly through the Portland airport, as I just have, and I will say that I would have driven here if I couldn't have, if I wasn't able to get would have arrived late, but I was definitely going to be here today. But when you're going through if you're running, as I was, through the Portland airport, you'll see a sign, and do you know what that sign says? Do you remember? Do not stop, keep moving. And yes, yes. So these are sort of words that Dr. Samar, I think, lives by. She's not stopping. She's working in support of Afghan women and Afghan people all the time. I want to give you a bit of bio information. I want to hear from her. She is the chair of the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission. She convened the commission a decade ago and is also the founder of the Shahada organization. She runs 100 schools, 15 clinics and hospitals in Afghanistan. She served as the first ever Minister of Women's Affairs from 2001 and 2002, and I should add that the Minister of Women's Affairs currently is the Afghan co-chair of the council together with the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So that great foundation that we have that she started as the first minister continues today. She was appointed in 2005 as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights for Sudan, and she has received the John F. Kennedy Profile of Courage Award, and is a central subject in the 2004 documentary film Daughters of Afghanistan. She's been honored by human rights and women's organizations worldwide, and we honor her today. And again, on behalf of the council, I want to thank CIEE for bringing her here to join us. The past recipients for this Justice of Women in Lecture series, very interestingly, last year, you heard from a representative from Liberia, and Liberian women have been very strong in supporting the peace process in their own country, so we'll be interested in hearing about that. And I want to just then start off by raising a question. I know we have many high school students here with us today, and welcome. And it's so exciting that the first class of Afghan girls is recently graduating from high school, having gone through the full K through 12 system. This has gone from the official number of girls being enrolled in school being 0 officially during the Taliban years to over 8 million today, with about 40% of girls being enrolled in primary schools. So what are your realistic hopes for these young women in today's Afghanistan, these young graduates? And what do you see as their primary obstructions and opportunities?
First of all, good afternoon to everybody, and I'm delighted to be here. And thank you for the people who gave me the opportunity to come here and talk about the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan, and to see a lot of young girls from around the world who would give me the courage to continue and hope that they will take the leadership to change the world everywhere. And I also want to thank the Afghan American Women Council, because I was the first co-chair when we established it in 2002, and I continue to be not fully involved, but sometimes involved with them still. Yes, in Afghanistan, actually, we've gone through 35 years that we are at war and conflict. We've gone through a very difficult time. But the most difficult one was during Taliban, when women were not allowed to walk. So the women were not allowed to wear high heel shoes to make noise to disturb the men or Taliban on the street. So currently, although I have to say that there were some school for girls, including I was running some school, even high school, the only high school for the girls during Taliban time. But of course, official number of the girls' school running by the government or public school was 0. And now we have around more than 3.5 million girls going to school, and 20 to 22% of the university students are girls. My hope and dream for these girls would be that they would be treated equal with full dignity in our country by getting education, by enforcing the values and the principles of human rights in the country.
That's our hope as well, certainly. I just came back from a conference, an initiative that the council had in Doha, Qatar, called the Rising Afghan Women's Leadership Initiative. And we had 22 amazing Afghan women leaders who joined us. And as you went around the room, and they're from business, they're from, we had 2 members of parliament from the health sector, but they all, or many of them, credited strong women in their lives as role models who had really made a difference for them in their lives and in their roles as leaders. You are a role model to so many women internationally and in Afghanistan, and I'm wondering, who is your own role model and why?
Well, I think when I was young, I was reading a lot of books about different revolution who I think brought some changes in the world. And of course, when I was young, it was 70s or late 60s. It was a lot of liberation movement in different parts of the world. A lot of countries were still under control of, let's say, bigger power, but they were fighting for their liberation. And my personal hero, I have to say that I was reading about men and women who fought for the freedom of their countries. So it was a lot of people. Actually, I was reading Jamila Abu Pasha from Algeria. I don't know how. I mean, I was reading her stories and how she stand and struggle for freedom of the country, how she gone through a lot of difficulties, including rapes and very bad sexual abuses. But she stand for the value that she believed. So I think that was the main things. But I read a lot of books of different women who are in politics and who really been a model for a lot of us. But I think to go through all those things, I have to say that I really learned personally what to do on daily basis. I just don't have a set of, let's say, a role to play, but I deal on daily basis, and I act based on the environment. I have to say, in order to survive.
I saw that you recently participated in a conference in Afghanistan that was hosted by women civil society leaders. And Afghanistan is having an election, a presidential election that's coming up on April 5th. I'm very happy that you can be here with us in advance of this very important election in Afghanistan. And I was interested to see that 8 out of the then 10 candidates, now 9, came and joined and spoke before the Afghan women civil society leaders in this forum.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I felt that to be very impressive, that they were seeing this as a true force and constituency.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to ask you about your thoughts about this, and if you are optimistic in that, or what your thoughts are in terms of that participation there, and then what do you see as at stake in terms of women's rights with this upcoming election, and how much a new president can positively or adversely influence the gains that women have made over the course of the past decade?
Well, I have to say that the first conference on election and women's rights was held by us, and 11th of the Human Rights Commission on 11th of December, that we invited all the candidates to come and talk about election and human rights, and particularly on women's rights. Yes. So it was interesting because it was first time actually that person like Ustad Sayyaf and the men from Hizb Islami Qutbuddin Hilal came to, and then they really stand and spoke.
And for context, this is a very conservative, at best,
absolutely, these are the Mujahideen leaders who are quite conservative, and they are very, very religious, right-wing conservative people. I mean, they were hardly talking about women's rights. So we brought them with this election, first in our meeting, and then it was another meeting by FIFA, which is Foundation for Free and Fair Election, on election in women's rights and women's participation. And the third conference was held by the Civil Society Women's Group that I also participated. Actually, I spoke about my experience, how did I resist in that society. But I think I see a lot of difference because we had election in 2004, we had election in 2009, the presidential election. And then, of course, we had the parliamentary election in 2005 and 2010, and we are going to have it next year. But there's a lot of difference with this election. First of all, as I said, it was first initiative that we took this initiative, and we invited the candidate to come and speak about these issues, about human rights and women's participation. And they really tried to speak and convince the women that they are for women's rights. It was first time, I have to say, and I am so hopeful because this is not only what they came and spoke for us, but then in different debate, there are questions in this regard, and they are participating. In the last election, in the first election in 2004, we didn't have any debate among the candidates. In 2009, we had only one debate between President Karzai and Bashar Dost, who was another candidate. But this time, it's a lot of debate in different television, in different language, in Pashto and Persian, and it's a lot of question in different issues in Afghanistan, including the reconciliation with Taliban and peace process in Afghanistan. So I'm very, very hopeful, and I think there is a lot of positive changes in Afghanistan. And I think, unfortunately, media only shows the bad accident in Afghanistan, or always the killing. Unfortunately, we had another explosion today in Faryab, which killed 18 people and injured another 40 people, including a woman and 2 children. But yes, we do have those terrorist activities in Afghanistan, but there is a lot of changes in Afghanistan also. And there's a lot of hope for the future in Afghanistan. And I personally am very hopeful we are not going back to Taliban time, or we will not allow the Taliban to come and rule us again and put us in jail, practically, under house arrest, all of women in Afghanistan.
And given your knowledge and your position in Afghanistan, your optimism really speaks volumes. And I think that we have felt this groundswell of support and also interest and activity by civil society, but also engagement by the candidates. So we're hopeful that the campaign promises that are being voiced will move beyond lip service into public service as they as whoever takes on the presidency assumes their role. Would you speak a bit, just offer us your candid thoughts about engagement with the Taliban, and maybe the concept good Taliban, bad Taliban, a little bit of background there for us, please.
Well, I think the concept of moderate Taliban and good Taliban or bad Taliban came from our neighboring country, who unfortunately is the host of the Taliban. And I remember when in 2002, President Pervez Musharraf from Pakistan was lobbying for inclusion of moderate Taliban in the government and so on. And it continues. So we don't know why it's a bad and why it's a good Taliban. I think what we do know, when they were ruling the country, we haven't seen, I mean, it can be a better person and very aggressive one, but I think Taliban is Taliban, and there's no difference between good and bad. In my personal view, being a Talib with that kind of mentality is not a crime, unless they impose their mentality and commit a crime against other people. I mean, if they believe on something and they want to live in that way, not to harm the others or violate the other people's rights, that's fine with me. But as soon as they impose their mentality on the others and they commit crimes, then that is a problem. So you can be quite a Democrat, or conservative, but when you commit or violate other people's rights, then it's a bad. On the reconciliation with Taliban or peace with Taliban, I think, yes, there are some steps taken by the government, and I think it is not going to work. And I publicly say, and I oppose this, because the reason I'm opposing is that there's not a strong political will by both sides on peace building, on peace process, or sitting on the table and discuss the issue. The second thing for us, for the Afghan government and the people who are in the government side, we have not defined our enemy. We don't know to talk with whom, with Mullah Omar or with Haqqani group, with bad Taliban or good Taliban, so we don't know with which one we are talking. Thirdly, I think there is not enough or united approach by the Afghan government in the international community in this process. Somehow it's a negative competition. Everybody wants to see somebody as a Talib. So most of the time they bring some shopkeepers and pay a lot of money, and then it turns out there's a normal shopkeeper, he's not even connected with Taliban. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of confusion in that. And my biggest observation is that unless you involve the people and you have the support of people, particularly the support of women and victims of violence in peace process, that peace process cannot be sustainable. You might sign a piece of paper that we did in the last 30 years. We signed different declaration with different peace agreement, but it did not bring sustainable peace in Afghanistan. And this one would be one again, we have another piece of paper and not a sustainable peace. But I think what we all missing, not only the Afghan government, the international community also, we are not focusing on good governance, on accountability, on justice, on responsiveness of the government to the needs of the people. So that's why we will not be able to bring peace with signing agreement or releasing few Taliban from Pakistani jails or our own jails in Afghanistan. So that is, I think we still have a long way to go, and I would suggest to Afghan government and also to the international community to push for good governance and responsive governance. The government should be responsible to provide security and basic social services to the people. Then the government will have the support of the public, and Taliban and the opposition to the government will naturally, practically be isolated, and there will be no space for them to act. So on that front, we have not done enough. So yes, we do have national army, we do have national police, and there's a contradiction when you just do not do enough. You build a good police, but if you are not reforming the judiciary system and keeping the judiciary system accountable, the police cannot act, because part of the legal system is functional and the other part is not functional. So it's not going to work properly. So the whole chain should be built properly in the same time. So that will bring peace, rather than finding some person with a long beard and a turban and bring them and make them as a representative of Taliban. So we hear different news. US wants to see some Taliban, Pakistan wants to see some Taliban, German wants to see Norwegian, UN. So we don't know exactly who's looking for what. So I think instead of doing that, it would be good to have a united approach and firm commitment for good governance and promotion of accountability and justice and human rights in the country.
And I asked for a candid answer, and that was wonderful. Thank you. That was informative for us. Can you tell us a bit about this responsive, accountable government and how and governance, and how your organization, the Independent Human Rights Commission, works in support of that ideal, and also the work that you do with respect to civic education? Maybe give us a bit of insight into what the commission does specifically.
Well,
and actually, if I may also add, how do foreign defenders of human rights in Afghanistan, what do we get wrong maybe about Afghanistan, the country, and its different contexts?
First of all, the Human Rights Commission, the establishment of a Human Rights Commission as a national institution for human rights, your country doesn't have it, unfortunately. And they should have, but Canada has. A lot of Central American countries do have a Human Rights Commission. It is a national institution for human rights based on Paris Principle, which is agreed by all the member states of United Nations. Our commission is in the Constitution. It's a constitutionalized institution or structure, but we are independent from the government. So this was established in 2002, and I was, from the beginning, when I was still Minister of Women's Affairs, I was given the job to coordinate or be a focal point from the government side to establish a Human Rights Commission. So we did establish the Human Rights Commission with a lot of support from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva and the UN. And we are working in different fields. We are working on human rights education because the people did not knew about the human rights. And using the word human rights was counted as a crime in Afghanistan during Taliban and before Taliban. So that is one of our biggest job to do, to give a civic education, not only to the normal people, but also to the judiciary, to the prosecutor, to the judges, to the teachers, to the police officers, to the National Army, including the intelligence service, that they should respect the values of human rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, generally. The second part of our work, I mean, we do work with the different ministries to change the curriculum of the school and so on. We are doing promotion and protection on women's rights because women were really neglected during the war in Afghanistan because we were not carrying the gun, so we were only producing the heroes, not being a hero ourselves. So we were the mother of the heroes or the sister of the heroes. So it is a lot of work on promotion and protection of women's rights, promotion in terms of changing the laws and make it more friendly to women's rights, including the ratification of CIEE and implementation of CIEE. I don't know if the people know CIEE, Convention of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I have to say that the person who drafted CIEE is an American, but America did not ratify it. US did not ratify CIEE. So then we have the protection in terms of if they are really in need on this domestic violence and any other violence by the government or state institutions. We try to protect them physically, help them putting in a shelter. So there's different policy that we have. And then we have child rights, again, promotion and protection on child rights, because we do have a lot of children in Afghanistan who are unfortunately working as young as 5-year-old, and carpet weaving and a lot of other, because they lost the male member of the family or the father, and they have to work in a very difficult situation. So we do a lot of promotion and protection on child rights, including we were the first when we raised the issue of child trafficking in Afghanistan, because we had no provision in our law, the child trafficking as a crime. So we pushed the president to sign a decree and make this child trafficking a crime or a punishment for child trafficking. And then we have rights of the people with disability also, because we have a lot of disabled in Afghanistan due to the war, and still, unfortunately, continues to be the case because of the mines and all these explosion and suicide attacks and so on. And also, we do have still people disabled by the diseases such as polio. Unfortunately, Afghanistan is one of the 3 countries in the world who still have polio. Recently, there was a case of polio in Kabul, so when we began to travel to India, now India requires that everybody has to take the polio vaccination before going to India, not to carry polio to India.
Right.
So it's a lot.
India just, with 1 billion people, just celebrated the, having no polio, so that's a...
Yeah,
yes,
a lot. I mean,
an
it's
achievement,
only
but it's
Nigeria, Pakistan, and Afghanistan who has polio. Then we have the monitoring and investigation. We have the possibility to investigate, or the ability, authority to investigate the cases. The people can come and complain to us, and we can take their cases to up, including the field monitoring that we monitor almost 20 basic rights: access to water, to education, to shelter, to health care, to justice, to whatever we see every day in our daily life. And then we publish the report with recommendation to the different stakeholders. And we have a special investigation team who looks only on civilian casualties. by both sides, by the government and the NATO forces, and also by the Taliban and opposition. And then we published a report that the civilian casualties gone down or up. And then we come up with recommendation. We actually were the first when we pushed the NATO forces to take this issue seriously, the civilian casualties, because there were some mistakes by them. So we work on that field. And I think the good part is that the Human Rights Commission, now we have 14 offices around the country. We have more than 600 people. The Human Rights Commission has been trusted by the public. And that is, for us, is really important. And we are exceptional in our region because none of our neighboring country has such establishment. Pakistan, 2 years ago, passed a legislation, but they have not established the Human Rights Commission. We helped the Pakistanis also to, from our experience, how to make the legislation for establishment of a Human Rights Commission. And our other neighboring countries doesn't have such a structure. So we are kind of a good model for
standard bearer, absolutely.
Yes. And then we are member of the Asia Pacific Forum, where all the Asia Pacific human rights institution or that network, we have full membership, and we are also have A status in the International Coordination Committee, where we, I think it's around 110 national institutions for human rights all over the world.
Wow.
So we have A status, although the environment in Afghanistan is really difficult. When I was saying that we invited the candidate, some of the candidate was not really willing to use the word human rights on their speeches, and now they come and sit in our conference and talk about women's rights and human rights. So there is
Amazing,
achievement.
Right? Incredible.
In that regard.
Well, thank you for giving us that context and idea of what you do in your day and night job. I think you're probably your 24-hour job in support of women's rights and human rights. You had mentioned CIEE, and in the United States, we do have a national action plan in support of women's rights. And I know that in Afghanistan in 2007, the NAPWA, which stands for the National Action Plan for Women in Afghanistan, was created in support of Afghan women. And then again in 2009, the Elimination of Violence Against Women Act was ratified, which criminalizes child marriage, forced marriage, selling and buying of women for the purpose or under the pretext of marriage, BAD, which is giving away a woman or a girl to settle a dispute, forced immolation, and 17 other acts of violence against women, including rape and beating. And the EVA Act specifies punishment for perpetrators. And I would like to get an idea from you about where you feel that legislation stands, and specifically enforcement and some of the challenges that you find day to day. Thank you.
Well, this Elimination of Violence Against Women law was again ratified or signed by the president in 2009 before the election. And I think that is also exceptional in our region, and particularly in Afghanistan, because domestic violence was the right of the men. So there were no law or no provision to criminalize the violence against women. And now that that is a tool that protects women. But when it comes to the implementation, I think slowly we are really advancing on implementation of the law. It was first time that the Ministry of Women's Affairs with Ministry of Finance published the report of the implementation of the elimination of violence against women in different parts of the country. We, one of the international NGO established or support the Special Prosecutor Department on this violence against women or elimination of violence against women. But we still have a long way to go, because, for example, we have it in some of the provinces, 10 provinces, and including in Jalalabad. We have 2 prosecutors over there, but it's a male prosecutor. So again, it doesn't really help a lot. It does help women who could come and brave enough to speak with the male prosecutor, but it doesn't really help everyone to come and speak freely to that department. And then, of course, the number of the complaint which comes to that department or on violence against women is compared to the one who is really gone to court and got punishment is higher. Because some people try to finalize or solve the dispute by mediation. Or they withdraw and it's always, they could be easily bribed. They would promise that they will buy you a lot of gold, so why you don't draw your case from the court? And unfortunately, it also, the woman doesn't want to leave the children and the family, so this is a nature of women. Usually they are not there to leave their children, and they are willing to bear the violence and the oppression to be with their children. So, but I think we are slowly moving toward the implementation of that law in the different part of the country. And I think it does require a very strong political will in that front. And we always follow up that case. Even we were pushed during different Eids or Eves, on 8 March, for example, the president signed a decree and reduced the imprisonment of some people, of some women actually, who were in prison. But during Eid or New Year, the president does pardon some people. And we include the provision that the president cannot pardon the criminals of violence against women. So some people, when they make the list of the people to be released, we look closely to that list. If there are some men who are in prison and they're pardoned by the president because of the act of violence against their family member or a woman in their family, we stop. So that is an achievement in a country like Afghanistan. And you don't see a strong Human Rights Commission in any conflict countries, including when I was working in Sudan. And the establishment of a national institution for human rights in Sudan was part of the comprehensive peace agreement. And yet, it's not established. From 2005, we are in 2014, 9 years. So we are much in advance in this regard.
And I'm happy you said that, because there have been, often people talk about the challenges of Afghan women, the struggles facing Afghan women, and there have been so many advances over the past decade. Obviously, the achievement, the establishment of the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission, maternal mortality has been cut in half. We've talked already about the number of girls who are going through school, the fact that about 28% of your parliament is comprised of women. I have many more questions, but I know that there are many questions out there as well. So if I may, I'd like to open it up to the floor. We have a question right here. Yes, please.
Hi. I missed it. Thank you for talking about, is this on? Oh,
And can you also identify, when you speak, would you please identify yourself, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
My name is Kate. I work for CIEE and International Faculty Development Seminars. I'm interested in, you were talking about the ending violence against women measures and talking a lot about criminalization. And I think in the United States, a lot of us have seen working with sexual and domestic violence to end that, especially against women, that criminalization hasn't really, it hasn't led to a lot of the advances in changing culture and actually stopping violence, and that education programs have really been the thing, trying to teach about gender and especially focusing on young men, because we have to change the minds of young men about how they think about women. So I'm wondering about initiatives like that, or if there are similar things happening beyond putting people in prison, which is also not working for us in the U.S. very well.
Oh, great question.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different program going on in this regard. You're right, education is key, and the women also should know about their rights in order to defend it, and in order to respect the other people's rights. So the men also should know it. But we in the Human Rights Commission even began to look at the curriculum of the school, that the curriculum of the school should be very friendly in promoting human rights inequality in their curriculum. Because it's a patriarchal society, and it was a lot of even the simple sentences in the first grade curriculum was very much male-dominated. Like Ahmad is playing football and the sister is helping the mother in the kitchen. So we removed all these things from the curriculum because it's not friendly. I mean, from early age, you teach that you should be in the kitchen and the boy can play football. So I think they both can play football and both can be in the kitchen. So it's a lot of, it's a really long way to go. But we took some initiative in this regard. And we keep talking about this in the radio and the television and publicly and different issue. But I think, again, unfortunately, we have very low literacy rate, and it does require a lot to do. And it should be a multi-dimension kind of a policy, not only on the curriculum, but also to change the economical status of the families and the understanding. One thing that you read something on the book, but the main issue is to have commitment, what you learn, and you should believe on it. I mean, some of the, I keep criticizing our leadership, saying that you want democracy on your neighbor's house, not in your own house. So yes, equality in the Constitution, but that equality should be exercised by everybody, by men and women, in everyday life.
Thank you. Other questions for Dr. Samar? We have a question in the back. One second.
Hi. I just had a quick question about something that we're reading a lot about in the news lately that might affect Afghanistan's future, which is the last I'd read, President Karzai still hasn't signed the bilateral security agreement, and I'm wondering if you have any comments or reflections on what that might mean for Afghanistan's future.
Well, I think we signed the strategic partnership with the U.S., so the bilateral security agreement was part of that. So, but somehow it is very politicized, and I have to say that it was not handled properly by both sides. Hopefully we'll be able to sign it with the next president. We will have election in less than 3 weeks in Afghanistan, and we will be able to sign that. Good. It is for us, for the citizen of Afghanistan, for the stability of Afghanistan, it's really important and it's valued. And the people of Afghanistan, the majority are supportive of signing that bilateral security agreement between the two countries and, of course, between the NATO forces, because our own national security forces still need training, mentoring, and support, and equipment, of course. So with that bilateral security agreement, we might get all those that requires for the security of the country and for the stability of the region, not only the security of Afghanistan.
Great.
Hi, my name is Catherine Menhard. I work here at CIEE. And I think we have the privilege of working with young people during this very potentially transformative period of their lives where they're still developing values and beginning, hopefully, expanding empathy and understanding a different perspective or frame around an experience. And they often idealize people that are farther down the road, the heroes of, they are the heroes of tomorrow, potentially. And I wonder if you had either a transformational experience in your young life that perhaps sent you on the path that you've taken, or if you have any recommendations for that group, of young people. Kind of a big question. So.
Thank you. I think when I was young, we had a much, much better life than the young generation today in Afghanistan, because at least it was secure. It was not very rich. We did not have access to all these technologies and the new clothes and so on, but we had the privilege to be safer in the country. Like I gone to a co-education school in Helmand. Helmand is one of the very conservative province today. So I gone to co-education school from the first grade up to 12, so no problem. And no resistance by the families in the area, or no attack on the school. But currently, that is not the case. In Helmand, you cannot even speak about the co-education school for the boys and girls. So unfortunately, we were victims of Cold War or proxy war in Afghanistan, and the kind of extremist religious groups were not existing in Afghanistan at that time. So again, with the invasion of the Russian, we got that. We were very unfortunate to be located in that place, or maybe we are fortunate, but we've been invaded, and then the whole proxy war of the Cold War was fought in Afghanistan, in our region. But I think my suggestion, my recommendation to the young generation would be that they are much privileged by having access to the new technology. But that technology should not be only used for Facebook and fun. It should be used for enriching their knowledge. So I was speaking to the school today, and I said, please read books also, because I see the young generation, at least in Afghanistan. I can't judge about the young generation here, that they play game not 24 hours, but at least 10 hours per day with their mobile phone or their iPod or whatever. I'm not sure if that is the only thing that they should do.
It's very diplomatic.
I don't know, because it doesn't really. In my own family, some of my nieces are playing with, and I get angry. Why don't you read something better in the internet rather than only playing game with the shooting a bird here and there, or playing with cards? So I think they should really try to empower themselves with knowledge, with understanding from the other part of the world. And the children who lives in this country or in other part of the European countries, maybe on the peaceful countries, they should use that opportunity in privilege and build their capacity. And they should understand about what's going on in the world, because whatever we impact us, it will have indirect impact on everybody's lives. And the example is the attack on 9/11. How many people lost their life, and how many countries were involved? Although I keep saying that the people who were involved on those terrorist attacks, either in New York or Washington, in Madrid or London, none of them were Afghan. But most of them were in Afghanistan or trained in Afghanistan. Then I get the blame. When I present my Afghan passport, everybody's looking at me, suspicious. Me with diplomatic passport, I am not treated equally because I'm coming from Afghanistan. So it does have an impact on everybody's life. You go through the security in the airport, that is an impact. It is harassment. The way they, all of us, I mean, take off the shoes or do this and that. You know. So please be aware of the problem in the other part of the world and be a responsible citizen to save this planet for all of us and for our children. I'll
Amen to
stop
that.
here.
Wonderful. No, that's, and that question also just relates, it was so interesting that her role model she found in a book about, you know, by a woman from Algeria in another country. And so that's a great message. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Kaplan.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is this better? So actually, my question was about access to books, and you mentioning Jamila Boupacha, who at the time was banned in France. And so I wanted to ask about access to books and access to information. How did you get a hold of Jamila Boupacha? Was that freely circulating in Afghanistan at the time? And did you have access to all those revolutionary texts that were circulating in the 60s and the 70s? And what is access to those kinds of books like now?
Well, of course we had access, but it was much limited. I mean, we were renting a book for every night to read from a bookstore in 2 Afghanis, which is, I mean, it's not a lot, but on that time at 2 Afghani we could buy 2 eggs maybe.
So an Afghani is the national currency of Afghanistan.
But today you can find everything. We were renting books in order to read. I mean, and then we were sharing with our friends. If we had a book and I was passing to my class fellow, you read the book, but be careful, don't destroy it, and so on. And we were giving to our family friends to read. But today it's a lot more than that. I mean, you can find in the internet everything. But of course, the accessibility in Afghanistan to internet is also limited. Everybody doesn't have access to internet because we don't have electricity everywhere. But yes, book is also available. But then how many people are reading? We have more than 300 printed media in Kabul at least. But how much you can read? I mean, I personally, when I see the newspaper, I just see the topics and then I'll read maybe 1 or 2 articles in the newspaper because it's repetition. But in some part of the country, like in Uruzgan maybe or in Paktika, there is no printed media, no newspaper. So we still have difficulties, but I think if they really have commitment, they can find ways to find book and read it.
And I will just add that about 90% of Afghanistan right now has cellular phone coverage, with about 80% of women having some access to that. And your 4G phones, you get better reception. Thank you. You get better reception in Afghanistan than you do here. So, so come to Afghanistan. We'll take one more question. Elizabeth. Oh, okay.
We could take a question from one of our remote participants. That would be great.
Yes, please.
She says, according to a law signed by President Karzai in 2009, Afghan Shia women do not have the right to education or work without their husband's permission, and this law permits marital rape. Can Dr. Samar tell us what is the current situation of Afghan Shia women, and has it changed?
Well, this is not the complete translation of the Shia personal status law, but it was a limitation. We were able to change that law, and we pushed the changes with a lot of difficulties. We faced a lot of resistance by the clerics, but it has changed a lot. There's no difference between Shia women and Sunni women in the country, so they can all exercise their rights according to the elimination of violence against women law. Because one of the good things with the elimination of violence against women law is that this law has preference than any other law in the country.
Yes.
So sheer personal status law is one of them, but this law has preference. Family law that we have, or civil law that we have, then this law has preference if there's a contradiction within the articles.
So I am going to do my role today, which is nothing more than to make sure Dr. Samar gets back to her hotel so she can rest up for this evening's events. I want to thank everyone around the world, all 250 or 300 from 50 countries, for joining us. I'm delighted we're able to take a question from the field. Love to know who sent that in. Be very curious to see where that came from and how connected we all are. To everyone here today, I want to thank you for joining the 3rd Annual Justice for Women Lecture Series. And in a particular way, I want to thank our honored guests, some of whom are here, Ms. Lovelace, Dr. Samar, Dr. Cole, who was our backup. Dr. Cole. We had a backup in case Lauren wasn't able to fly in or drive in from D.C.
Dr. Charlotte Cole, who's been a wonderful friend of the council. Thank you.
Also part of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council. Dr. Samar will be back on stage this evening at the law school's Abraham Center. So if anyone would like to join her again this evening and learn more and have a chance to ask a question, please do so this evening. And I would like to extend my very sincere appreciation for you being here today and for the advice that you gave the teachers in the school, the high school students that joined us at lunch. The advice was on the importance of finding good mentors. The student advice was the importance of identifying good male role models to further justice and women's rights for women and girls. And so I think it's been a great afternoon. We have a couple of special little gifts for everyone that we're going to do a little photo session up here. And Dr. Samar will be wandering out, so if you want to grab her for a quick question or photograph, please do so. But she'll be heading home for a couple of hours rest. Dr. Samar, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Cole.
And
Thank you. Thank you very much.
thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
She personifies the motto of the Portland Airport, don't stop, keep moving. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We actually have no choice not to move.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tashakkur.